The tie I handed over was tossed into the trash can at the corner of the room in the next moment. I, taken aback, blinked at Bob. "We don't need cheap junk. Did you even check inside?" "Huh?" Behind a bewildered-looking Bob, Catherine was grinning. I locked eyes with Bob and then slowly shifted my gaze to Catherine. "Wait, you're telling me that was from you, sis?" "Sorry it looked cheap." Catherine's well-composed face transformed into something terrifyingly fierce. Seeing her like this, Bob was visibly shaking. I thought Michelle picked it out." "Just 'cause Michelle picked it doesn't mean you can just throw it out." Catherine was fuming, and I, rather inappropriately, was getting excited. "I'm going to reveal all of Bob's misdeeds right here and now." I took a deep breath. "My name is Michelle. I'm a 47-year-old part-time working housewife. Soon after graduating from college, I got married and had a child, so it feels like I've already started my second life. But with Bob still actively working, and me working a full-time part-time job for the last 10 years, we haven't had time for things like traveling. So, this second life is pretty much business as usual." I met Bob in college. It was just a regular college, but they had active clubs, especially the basketball team, which was top tier nationally. And the captain of that basketball team was Bob. He was tall and well-built, the team's main player and ace. Back then, Bob was quite popular, and I, being one of the team managers, never thought he'd choose me. But he did, even confessing his feelings for me. I felt on top of the world. He proposed when I was in my senior year of college, assuring me he was financially stable as he was already working. My parents, having also married as students, had no objections, so half a year after starting my senior year, we got married. We had a simple but decent wedding, and I was very happy. The first year of our marriage was smooth sailing. I had decided not to go full-time because Bob's company frequently relocated its employees, so I continued my part-time job. But, near the end of college, I found out I was pregnant, and to ease Bob's concerns, I quit my job. During my pregnancy, my sister-in-law Catherine and my in-laws were super supportive, making me feel grateful for marrying into such a family. However, after our daughter Julia was born, our marital bliss began to fade. Julia, who often cried at night and was a clingy baby during the day, was quite a handful for a first-time mom like me. Catherine and the in-laws did help, but there were times when I had to manage on my own. I often found solace in crying alone. Bob, on the other hand, although initially supportive, began to frequently go out for drinks, and by the time Julia was 6 months old, he stopped helping with household chores entirely. Even on his days off, when I'd ask him to spend some time with Julia, he'd begrudgingly play with her for about 10 minutes, then pass her back to me and head off to the casino or somewhere. "Hey, can you spend a bit more time with Julia?" "Ugh, I'm kinda busy, you know?" Whenever I mentioned it, Bob would just sigh heavily. Then, he'd chuckle and try to reason with me. "You might not get it since you've never worked outside the home, but being a working adult is tough. If we don't refresh on weekends, we can't keep going. Understand?" Bob said that and playfully tapped my head. I hated that gesture of his. But it's true that Bob is the one supporting our family, and I indeed don't have any experience in the workforce. Because of that, every time he said something like that, I'd swallow any retorts, and eventually, I stopped asking anything of Bob. So, without paying any attention to his family, Bob led a life that was hardly fatherly, only interacting with Julia when he was in a good mood. And this went on for over 20 years. But then, something changed, and he began actively engaging with Julia. "Julia, let's go out and have some fun." "Okay." Every weekend, I'd watch them head out together and I'd be left to tackle the household chores. Thanks to starting a part-time job about 10 years ago, our financial situation became more comfortable. But chores would pile up, so weekends were dedicated to cleaning and meal prep. Up until 3 years ago, Julia was on my side. She'd help out, get me gifts, but ever since she started going out with Bob, she completely sided with him. The reason was simple: Bob would buy her things every time they went out. She'd come home holding bags full of new clothes, accessories, and other items. At first, she seemed taken aback by the gifts, but now, she'd happily head straight to her room and try everything on. Maybe you shouldn't be buying her expensive things every week. Huh? Oh, are you jealous of Julia? Can't blame me. She's way prettier than an old hag like you. Bob laughed it off and headed to Julia's room. Indeed, Julia, lively and radiant like Bob, is undeniably beautiful. She seems aware of it too, and, not to brag, but she's gorgeous enough to be a celebrity. I, on the other hand, am rather plain. But I'm only 45. There's no reason for him to call me an old hag. Fed up, I decided to confront them and headed towards Julia's room. But just as I was about to turn the doorknob, I overheard a shocking conversation. Thanks, Dad. This is so cute. You look great in it. Just like your old man's daughter. Please thank Amanda for me too. I wanted to match with her. Amanda's pretty, just like you. The store clerk today even said we're a good-looking family. Really? That makes me so happy. I couldn't grasp what they were talking about. Who's this beautiful family? I thought it was just the two of them going out every weekend. Standing there with my hand on the doorknob, my eyes widened in confusion. Tears streamed down my face, but I was paralyzed. Oblivious to my presence, Julia and Bob kept laughing and chatting about their next outing. The resentment I felt towards them was overwhelming. The next day, on my way back from work, I stopped by a private detective agency. The staff there was very kind, and I poured out everything that had been bottled up inside me. Right then and there, I decided to have them investigate Bob and Julia. A few months later, when I received the investigation report, I was stunned. Bob met his mistress almost daily, and on weekends, they'd take trips with Julia. But as I read on, even more shocking details emerged. No! This can't be real! Faced with Bob's blatant deceit, anger bubbled up within me. I'll never forgive him, I'll get my revenge. Just as that thought crossed my mind, a message pinged on my smartphone. It was from Catherine, inviting me to a celebration at their family home in honor of Bob's recent promotion. I hadn't heard a word about Bob's promotion, but I decided to accept Catherine's invitation. I didn't want to buy a gift to celebrate his promotion, but it'd seem odd if I were the only one who didn't bring anything. So, I decided to get something with Catherine's help. We purchased a high-end, custom-made tie from a shop that made even finer suits than the ones Bob usually wears. The tie cost me $300. We'll put it in a plain paper bag so he won't guess what's inside right away. It's a surprise. I hope he likes it. I hope so. Imagining her younger brother's happy face, Catherine looked pleased. A part of me felt guilty, but my desire for revenge against Bob was much stronger. With determination, I moved forward with my plan. The day of Bob's celebration arrived. As we were leaving the house, Bob noticed the plain bag in my hand and couldn't hide his disappointment. Without a word, we headed to the family home. Once there, Bob's parents and Catherine joined us, and we enjoyed a delightful meal. Shall we start with the gifts? Who wants to go first? Me. Happy promotion, Dad. Julia handed him a no-brand handkerchief. Though it came in a neat box, it didn't look particularly expensive. But Bob, who usually loved branded items, accepted it with a smile. It's unusual for Bob, who's always loved branded items. With that in mind, I pulled out the tie box from the paper bag and handed it to Bob. Congratulations on your promotion. This is from me and... Huh! The tie I'd given Bob was tossed into a trash bin in the corner of the room the next moment. Stunned, I shot Bob a surprised look. I don't want this cheap trash. Did you even check what's inside? Huh? Behind a puzzled-looking Bob, Catherine was smiling. Our eyes met, and I slowly shifted my gaze to Catherine. Wait, did you? My bad for choosing something cheap. Catherine's calm face suddenly turned fierce. Seeing her like that, Bob was visibly shaking. No, I thought Michelle chose it.
Why would it be okay to throw away something Michelle got for you?
Catherine's fiery anger made me feel excited inappropriately. I decided to expose all of Bob's misdeeds right there and then. I took a deep breath. Catherine, it's okay. I'm not upset. But, still.
It's really okay. After all, who needs a gift from someone they're about to divorce, right?
Everyone present was shocked by my words. Bob was trembling, but tried to stay calm, speaking to me in a soft voice. So, divorce? I know I overdid it just now. I'm sorry, okay? Wait. You think this is all about what just happened? What are you talking about? Bob, not understanding my true intentions, stuttered. Amidst the tension, a nonchalant voice chimed in.
Why not divorce? It doesn't concern me anymore.
Julia. Julia, twirling her long hair between her fingers, continued without a pause.
I mean, she's just a regular lady who's barely been out in the world, right? It's obviously better to have someone stylish as a mother.
She was probably talking about Bob's mistress. Bob, unaware that I knew about her, looked uncomfortable. Seeing them, I sarcastically said, Oh, so what was her name, Amanda? Isn't she more to Julia's liking?
How do you know about Amanda?
Bob was visibly panicked at my revelation of his affair. Julia, however, remained unaffected. I said to the two of them, dripping with sarcasm. See, you've lost your love for me and you want to remarry, right? Too bad I don't have the time or the interest in someone else right now. Well, you see. Suddenly, all eyes in the room were on Bob, who was struggling for words. Julia, for once, seemed to think something was amiss and stopped playing with her hair to observe Bob. Making up reasons to cheat and convincing Julia of them, you just don't want to look bad, huh? What do you mean? Julia looked confused as she pressed Bob for answers. It made sense, after all. Bob had told Julia that I was having an affair and was considering divorce. He even said that when he introduced her to his mistress, they were keeping their relationship a secret because I was reluctant to divorce, but they planned to marry as soon as they could. When I learned of this, my head ached. I never cheated, and the reason I wasn't home much was because of my increased part-time work hours. Deceiving our daughter with lies and luring her with gifts? That's just the worst kind of parenting. Dad, you said Mom was cheating, right? That she refused to divorce even though you wanted to. Was that a lie? It wasn't exactly a lie, but...
If it wasn't a lie, why is Mom acting so confident then?
Julia's shrill voice echoed through the room. I replied calmly. He probably thought it'd be more convenient to deceive you. That way, after the divorce, it'd be easier for him to bring you around to Grandpa and Grandma's, or maybe it'd be easier for him to return to his parents' place. Probably reasons like that.
It's a lie.
Julia seemed unable to believe my words and kept repeating.
It's a lie.
Bob was visibly shaken and pale. I handed him the business card of a divorce attorney. Wait, Michelle, can we discuss the divorce? Aren't you planning to marry, what was her name, Vanessa? It seems Julia likes her quite a bit, so I don't see a problem. But, we've been together for over 20 years, there's a bond. The bond you're talking about isn't with me, it's with the alimony you don't want to part with, isn't it? I said sharply, and he glared back, clearly struck by the truth. The image I once admired was nowhere to be seen. He just looked like a regular middle-aged man. It's only now that I realize my feelings for him have completely vanished.
Is that true?
Suddenly, Catherine's voice cut through the tense room. Bob visibly flinched. The real person to be feared in this house wasn't the in-laws, it was Catherine. She had been engaged to a man who cheated on her and had been single ever since. Despite her beauty and being the center of attention wherever she went, Catherine rejected all advances after her engagement was broken off. You know I despise men who cheat, right? Yes.
So why did you do this? You hurt Michelle. What were you thinking?
Catherine's voice was steady, but there was an undertone of quiet anger. Everyone in the room was on edge. Bob was shaking, his face pale.
Right now, the best thing you can do is accept the divorce, pay the alimony, and then cut ties with this family. Got it? Cut ties? Why? Because I can't stand the idea of such a terrible man being part of our family.
Catherine shot back. Bob's eyes widened in shock, and he slouched in disbelief. Those words must have hurt, especially since Bob had always been so close to his sister. Tears began to form in his eyes.
Michelle should be the one crying. You don't have any right to shed tears,
Catherine said, not letting up. Bob remained silent, his gaze dropped. I then decided to hand him another document to seal the deal.
Oh, by the way, I got this from Amanda,
I informed him.
You met Amanda?
Bob exclaimed. When he saw the document I handed him, his eyes darted back and forth in confusion. It was a formal request for alimony.
What? What's this alimony claim all about?
Isn't it because you lied about being single? Bob looked as though he had completely forgotten that he had lied. Turns out, Bob met Amanda at a dating event held at a high-end hotel. He forged documents to appear single and approached Amanda. To ensure there's no discrepancy with reality, he said the reason for the divorce was his ex-wife's infidelity. Though they were divorced, she still hadn't left. Both he and his daughter were struggling, but since she was doing all the housework, he treated her as if she were just a housemaid. He believed that if he found someone else to marry, his ex-wife would give up on reconciliation and finally leave. He kept asking Amanda to wait a little longer while he convinced her. When Amanda told me all of this, I was fuming inside. When I showed her our marriage record and explained that we weren't divorced and that I had never cheated, Amanda apologized profusely. She offered to pay alimony, but since she believed he was single when they started dating, I didn't feel like demanding it.
I have a message from Amanda. She doesn't want to see you ever again.
What? Most likely, Bob was thinking of having Amanda cover his living expenses in exchange for the alimony he owed me. Bob's face was one of utter despair.
Mom, I'm sorry. I had no idea.
Julia timidly apologized beside the silent Bob. Having a 25-year-old daughter who can't differentiate right from wrong and takes her mother for granted is unacceptable.
You don't have to apologize,
I replied coldly.
Mom, after the divorce with Dad is finalized, you'll have to leave the house. What? Why?
I sighed at Julia's reaction. The house we live in is in my name. I inherited the property when my relatives passed away, which is why Bob and I started living there. I had mentioned this to Julia before, but she seemed to have forgotten.
No matter how deceived you were, your attitude towards your mother is unacceptable. I can't forgive you anymore. I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave with Dad. No, please! Mom, let's live together happily again. Please!
Julia begged, her voice filled with desperation. I coldly stared at the frantic Julia. Then, my usually silent mother-in-law chimed in.
Bob and Julia, please never come back to this house. What? Mom!
Bob looked up in shock at his mother's words. My mother-in-law was fuming, her face red with anger. Seeing her like that, Bob couldn't hide his shock and shed tears. Julia was just frozen in shock, seeing the usually kind-hearted mother-in-law change so drastically.
I don't want to talk to people who hurt others like you. Please leave,
she firmly said. Bob was taken aback. Suddenly, my father-in-law stood up, grabbed Bob by the collar, and dragged him out of the house. At first, Bob banged on the house door and shouted, "Let me in." But when the neighbors started gathering, he left with Julia. Back at my in-laws, I enjoyed some tea and cake my mother-in-law prepared, finally having a moment of peace. I then filed for divorce. With the alimony from Bob, I became fairly wealthy. As for Bob, not only did I take the savings he'd been hiding, but it also came out that he had forged documents at the dating event.
His colleagues, who had attended the same event, exposed his lies at work. As a result, he lost his credibility and, despite having been promoted, was sidelined. Julia made a significant error at work. While she wasn't fired, her salary was substantially cut. Moreover, I heard she had an affair with a married senior colleague at work and is currently in a dispute about it. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I thought to myself, feeling somewhat detached from the whole situation. It seems that after being kicked out of the house, the two of them started living together. However, since I always took care of all the household chores, neither of them know how to do any, so their house is a mess, they constantly eat out, have no money, and they argue daily. On another note, Amanda, after breaking up with Bob, married her childhood friend. I heard through the grapevine that she's now a mother of twins. Even though she must have been hurt being deceived by Bob, it's good to see her moving forward and grabbing a happy future. I felt a sigh of relief. I thought our relationship with my in-laws and Catherine might end because of what Bob did, but we're still on good terms. According to Catherine, she considers me like a sister, so our bond won't break so easily. I'm really grateful to have such a kind-hearted family-in-law. And guess what? Catherine recently got herself a boyfriend. He's 5 years older than her. Even though Catherine used to say she'd never marry again, he's so gentle and understanding that he could melt her stern heart. Recently, I heard from my mother-in-law, in a secret-sharing tone, that Catherine has been sneaking bridal magazines into her room. It was heartwarming to see her act so cute about it. As for me, I was promoted to a full-time position at the company where I was working part-time, and I'm really hustling. Life is pretty busy, but living just for myself is quite fun. I sold the house and started living on my own. It was quite a shock when all my moving boxes fit into just one cardboard box. Now, I'm slowly getting furniture that suits my taste. Living surrounded by things I love makes me so happy, and no matter how busy I am, when I get home, I feel so refreshed and recharged for the next day. I often think I should have made this change sooner. Recently, a colleague has asked if I'd like to adopt a cat. Life with a cat? Sounds good. With these thoughts in mind, I decide to live my life, being true to myself.